The forest you enter, once part of Wonwai, the entrance. I did not plan to enter the forest. I need to repeat that because intent matters here. Not to the forest, but to what comes after. The road ended where roads usually do not. Not at a crossroads, not at a dead end marked by signs or barriers. It simply stopped, as if someone had decided that asphalt was unnecessary beyond that point. I slowed down without realizing it. My foot eased off the pedal. The engine noise felt too loud for the place. The forest stood close to the road, too close. Pines pressed inward, their branches forming a wall of dark green needles. No wind moved them. They did not sway. They waited. That was when I saw the sign. It hung between two trees, suspended by a rusted chain that had eaten through its own links. The wood was old, grey with age, warped by moisture and time. Once it had been painted white. Now the paint clung only in thin flakes. The letters were carved, not written, deep, careful, permanent. If you enter this forest, you will not leave. I stood there longer than I meant to. Silence pressed against my ears. Not the peaceful kind, not the kind filled with distant birds or insects. This silence was complete, intentional. Below the warning, another message had been added later. The cuts were uneven, as if whoever carved them had been in pain or in a hurry. The bear is not the danger. I remember thinking that this was someone's idea of humor, a local legend, a deterrent meant to scare tourists or hikers. I remember smiling. That should have frightened me more than anything else. I stepped forward. The chain creaked. Behind me, the road was gone. I turned around immediately. I am not brave. I'm not curious to the point of stupidity. I turned because the disappearance felt sudden, wrong, like realizing you have missed a step on a staircase. There was no asphalt behind me, no tire marks, no sign that a road had ever existed. Only forest. The trees stood closer together now, their trunks forming a tight wall where open space had been seconds before. I stepped backward, expecting resistance, confusion, panic. Instead, my heels struck solid ground. The forest had closed. At first, I convinced myself that I had simply crossed into private land, that my sense of direction had failed. These explanations lasted exactly as long as it took me to notice the air. It felt thicker, not humid, not heavy with fog, just dense, as if every breath had to pass through something unseen before reaching my lungs. I walked. The forest accepted that. The ground was soft underfoot, layered with needles and moss. No underbrush blocked my path, no thorns, no fallen trees. It was easy to move forward, too easy. After several minutes, I realized something else. I was not tired. My breathing stayed even, my legs did not burn, my heartbeat did not quicken. Time did not feel slow, it felt paused. I stopped walking. The forest did not respond. No wind, no movement, no sound. I turned around. The path behind me looked exactly like the path ahead. That was when I understood that direction no longer mattered. I tried to leave properly after that. I picked a direction at random and walked with purpose, counted my steps, marked trees with shallow cuts using my keys. After 10 minutes, I reached the same tree I had marked first. The cut was deeper now, not by my hand. The forest was not confusing me, it was correcting me. I heard the bear before I saw it. Not footsteps, weight, a pressure in the ground that travelled upward through my feet, into my legs, into my chest. It stood between the trees, partially obscured by shadow. Huge, motionless, its fur absorbed light rather than reflecting it. Its head was lowered slightly, not in aggression, but in attention. Its chest did not rise, it was not breathing. I felt something ancient and absolute settle into my bones. Running did not occur to me. Predators chase. This thing did not need to. We stood like that for a long time. Then the bear turned and walked deeper into the forest, not away from me, away from something else, and without understanding why, I followed. Part 2. The Forest Learns. I followed the bear because stopping felt worse than moving. That realization came to me slowly, like most things in the forest. Nothing arrived suddenly, nothing forced itself. Every decision felt like it had already been made before I became aware of it. The bear moved with deliberate patience, each step pressed into the ground without sound, yet I felt the vibration travel through my feet, up my legs, into my chest. The forest seemed to lean inward around it, branches arching subtly as if making room. I noticed that the air felt different behind the bear, thicker, heavier, not oppressive, but attentive. I was being led. The deeper we went, the older the forest became. The trees grew wider, their bark rough and layered, scarred by time rather than damage. Moss clung to them in dense sheets. Roots broke through the soil like bones, twisting across the ground in patterns that felt intentional. Names appeared everywhere. Some were shallow, barely visible beneath layers of bark growth. Others were freshly cut, pale and raw. A few names repeated, carved again and again on different trees, as if the forest had given someone multiple chances to be remembered. Dates followed some of them, not consecutive, decades apart. The forest did not care about time the way humans did. It stacked moments instead of letting them pass. I found the first backpack beneath a tree that had split down the middle, its trunk hollowed by age. The bag rested upright, as if someone had placed it there carefully. I unzipped it. Inside were clothes folded with care, a water bottle still sealed, a notebook wrapped in plastic, no signs of panic, no torn fabric, no blood. Someone had planned to leave. I understood then that no one here had been dragged or chased. They had chosen to stop. The forest did not trap people by force. It convinced them that stopping was reasonable. I began to see others, not all at once, one at a time, always at the edge of my vision. A man standing knee-deep in ferns, unmoving, his head tilted slightly as if listening. A woman walking slowly in a wide circle, repeating the same path without noticing. A boy crouched beside a tree, tracing patterns in the dirt with his fingers, over and over. None of them reacted to the bear, none of them reacted to me. They were already elsewhere. Eventually, one spoke. I tried to wait it out, he said. He sat on a fallen log, hands resting on his knees, staring straight ahead. His voice was calm, conversational. I asked him what he meant. "The watching," he replied. "I thought it would get tired if I stayed still long enough." I looked around but saw nothing. "It never does," he continued. "It just gets better at it." When I blinked, he was gone. The log beneath him remained warm, and the forest began to repeat itself after that. Clearings returned with small variations. A stone slightly out of place, a tree leaning at a different angle. Streams curved back toward themselves, forming loops that fed their own sources. I realized that the forest was not endless, it was iterative. Each loop refined something. Each repetition learned from the last, and I was part of the process. I felt it studying me, not judging, not threatening, learning. Part 3. Those who stay. The forest did not introduce them to me all at once. It revealed them gradually, the way your eyes adjust to darkness, not by adding light, but by removing what distracts you. At first, I thought I was alone. Then I realized I was surrounded. They stood everywhere once I learned how to see them. Some leaned against trees. Others stood several steps off the path, half hidden behind trunks or branches. A few sat on the ground, back straight, hands resting loosely on their knees like people waiting for instructions that never came. They were not frozen. They were paused. Their eyes were open. Their chests rose and fell slowly, deliberately. Some blinked. Some shifted their weight slightly as if maintaining balance. These were not corpses. These were not victims. These were people who had stopped at the correct moment. I approached one of them carefully. A man stood beside a pine whose bark was thick and deeply ridged. His right hand rested flat against the trunk, fingers spread wide. His face was calm, almost peaceful. "Hello," I said. No response. I moved closer. I could hear his breathing now, shallow, controlled, perfectly even. When I touched his shoulder, his skin was warm. Too warm. His eyelids fluttered. "I'm listening," he whispered. "To what?" I asked. He smiled faintly without opening his eyes. "You'll hear it soon enough." The tree behind him shuddered, almost imperceptibly, and the man was gone. There was no sound of movement, no step, no retreat. The space he had occupied simply ceased to include him. That was when I understood the difference. There were those who wandered, and there were those who stayed. The wanderers still thought of themselves as separate. They spoke. They remembered fragments of their lives before the forest. Their forms remained mostly human, though something about them always felt unfinished, like sketches left half complete. The ones who stayed had crossed a quieter threshold. They no longer asked questions. They had found the position where the forest could hear them most clearly. The bear did not acknowledge them. It did not need to. The bear was not responsible for keeping people. The forest did that on its own. As night approached, the forest changed its posture. Shadows stretched, not away from light, but toward me. Sounds aligned, every crack, every distant movement, every breath I took felt synchronized, as if the forest were tuning itself. That was when I noticed the roots. They were everywhere. Some lay exposed on the surface, thick as ropes, weaving across the ground in slow, deliberate curves. Others emerged from the soil to wrap around stones, fallen branches, even abandoned objects. I saw a shoe half embedded in the earth, its laces threaded through roots that had grown into and through it. The forest did not bury people, it incorporated them. I spent that night standing, not because I was afraid to sit, because sitting felt final. The forest did not demand rest. It offered it, constantly, gently. The ground seemed to soften beneath my feet, as if encouraging me to stop resisting gravity. I understood then how people stayed, not by force, by relief. Sometime before dawn, I heard voices, not words, names. They came from different directions, overlapping, layered. Some were whispered. Others were spoken clearly, confidently, as if called by someone nearby. I heard my own name once. It did not frighten me. That terrified me more than fear would have. I found a clearing I had not seen before. At its center stood a tree unlike the others, thicker, older. Its bark was layered with names, hundreds of them carved one over another, some barely legible beneath the rest. At the base of the tree stood people, dozens of them. They faced the trunk, hands pressed against it, foreheads resting against the bark. Their bodies were still, but the tree pulsed faintly, rhythmically. Breathing. I stepped closer and felt it immediately. A pressure behind my eyes, a sense of alignment, as though something were adjusting my position within a larger structure. I understood what this place was. This was not where people disappeared. This was where they were kept accessible. A woman turned her head slightly as I approached. "You shouldn't be walking anymore," she said softly. "Why not?" I asked. "Walking is how it learns what you resist." I asked her why she stayed. She did not answer right away. Finally, she said, "Because standing still felt like being understood." Then she turned back to the tree. I did not see her again. That was the moment the forest stopped observing me passively. I felt its attention narrow, not aggressively, precisely. It was no longer asking what I would do, it was asking where I fit. I left the clearing before the forest could decide for me. That was a mistake. Because leaving meant I had chosen movement. And movement required correction. Part 4. The Bear and the Shapes. I stopped measuring time after the clearing. Not because time disappeared, but because it became unreliable. Light shifted without warning. Shadows stretched and collapsed in ways that made counting hours meaningless. The forest no longer marked progression, it marked states. I was no longer being observed as a stranger, I was being considered. The bear returned without announcement. There was no sound to warn me, no breaking branches, no breath. One moment the space ahead was empty, and the next it was occupied by weight. It stood on a slope overlooking a narrow stream. The ground beneath it was bare, stripped of moss and leaves, as if nothing could grow there anymore. The bear did not look at me at first. It stared at the water. I followed its gaze. The reflection was wrong. The bear's body above the surface remained familiar, massive, dark, recognizably animal. But in the water, its shape extended far beyond its physical limits. Its limbs were longer, thinner. Its spine rose higher than should have been possible. From its shoulders grew branching forms that resembled antlers, roots, or unfinished limbs. The reflection was not distorted, it was complete. I understood then that what I had seen walking through the forest was not the bear itself, it was the compression. So the forest cannot present itself all at once. That much was clear. Its true structure is too large, too layered, too contradictory to be perceived directly. So it builds answers, temporary forms, interfaces. The bear was one of them, not the first, not the last. I felt the forest around us tighten its focus. The trees leaned inward slightly, their trunks bending just enough to redirect attention. The stream slowed, its surface smoothing, until the reflection became perfectly still. The bear finally turned its head toward me. Its eyes were not empty. They were full. Not of hunger, not of rage, of certainty. I felt a pressure in my chest, like the moment before speaking a truth you have avoided for too long. I understood what the bear was waiting for. It was waiting for me to stop moving. The forest showed me others then, not physically, internally. Images layered behind my eyes, people standing at different thresholds in different places. A subway tunnel closed for maintenance, a collapsed building fenced off but still accessible through a gap, a mountain trail marked as unfinished on outdated maps. Different forests, different shapes, the same function. Each place had its own answer, its own guardian. Some took animal forms, others took human ones. Some did not move at all. The bear belonged here. It was designed for stillness. I remembered something I had not lived. Standing at the edge of a forest years before, hesitating, feeling the urge to step forward simply because the silence felt directed. I remembered stepping back. The memory did not belong to me. It belonged to the forest. It was showing me a failure. The bear stepped closer. Not aggressively, deliberately. Each step reduced the space where decision was possible. I felt the ground soften beneath my feet again, the same gentle invitation to stop resisting gravity, to let my weight settle. I realized then that the forest does not take people when they are afraid. It takes them when they are tired of choosing. I almost stayed. That truth is important. I felt relief at the thought of it. No paths, no corrections, no repetition, just alignment, just standing in the right place and letting the forest hold the rest. I understood why the others had stayed. It was not surrender, it was resolution. Something interrupted the moment, a sound I had not heard before. Metal, a faint clatter, distant but distinct. Not part of the forest's vocabulary, not wood, not water, not breath. The bear froze, not in alarm, in recalibration. The forest's attention shifted outward, momentarily divided. The pressure in my chest eased just enough for thought to return. I moved. That was my final mistake inside the forest. Because movement, once noticed, must be addressed. The forest did not pursue me. It rearranged. Paths shortened, slopes steepened, distance collapsed. I ran, but running felt symbolic rather than functional. I was allowed to move only as much as was necessary to reach a conclusion. The bear did not follow. It did not need to. I emerged at dawn, asphalt beneath my feet. Cold air, the sound of engines in the distance. The forest ended cleanly behind me, as if cut with a blade. No pursuit, no final warning, only absence. I stood there for a long time, waiting for something to happen. Nothing did. That was when I understood the final function of the bear. It does not stop people from leaving. It ensures that those who leave do so correctly. Part 5. You were never meant to leave. I expected relief. That was my first mistake outside the forest. I stood on asphalt at dawn, waiting for the sensation to arrive. Panic, collapse, disbelief, anything that would confirm I had escaped something extraordinary. But my body behaved as if nothing unusual had happened. My breathing was steady. My hands did not shake. My thoughts were clear, too clear. The forest did not follow me. It continued me. People spoke to me as if I were intact. A man asked if I needed help. A woman asked if I was lost. I told them no. That answer felt true. I was not lost. I was precisely where I had been placed. Life resumed in fragments. I returned home. I showered. I ate. I slept. But sleep no longer separated days. It flattened them. I woke with the certainty that time had passed, but without the feeling of movement. Morning and night became labels rather than experiences. Dreams stopped. In their place came recollections, paths I had never walked, decisions I had never made, moments of hesitation that did not belong to my life, yet felt familiar. I understood then that memory was no longer confined to the self. Trees changed first, not visibly, emotionally. Some felt empty when I passed them, like shells left behind after something had moved on. Others felt attentive, not watching, listening. I learned to slow near them. I learned that standing too long caused a subtle pressure behind my eyes, the same sensation I had felt in the clearing. The forest was still calibrating me. I heard the breathing again on the third night. Slow, heavy, measured. It came from inside the walls. I tore open the drywall in my bedroom, expecting pipes, wires, insulation. There was nothing. The sound stopped when I stepped back. It resumed when I lay down. That was when I realized the forest no longer required proximity. I began to notice patterns. Trains delayed for reasons no one could explain. Roads closed without clear cause. Hiking trails removed from maps, but still accessible. People lingered at thresholds longer than they needed to. I felt it when they did. A tension, a narrowing, a moment when curiosity outweighed caution. The forest spoke now through timing. I did not warn them, not because I did not want to, because warning would have been interference, and interference would have been noticed. The bear came to me without form. I felt it in pauses between thoughts, in the stillness after someone asked a question and before I answered, in the silence that followed, a decision already made. The bear no longer needed a body. It needed hesitation. As long as people paused at edges, in physical or otherwise, the shape held. The forest had learned to distribute itself. I returned to the road months later, not out of longing, out of confirmation. The sign stood where it always had: new wood, clean cuts, perfect alignment. It did not warn, it did not invite. It recorded, "Entry open." I felt no fear reading it, only recognition. Well, that was when I understood the final truth. The forest does not exist to contain people. It exists to classify them. Those who resist, those who wander, those who stay, and those who leave correctly. Leaving is not escape. Leaving is deployment. Or if you have listened this far, you may believe you are outside this system. You are not. The forest does not require trees anymore. It requires moments. Places where sound fades, where maps fail, where paths narrow and decisions feel heavier than they should. If you have ever felt drawn to such places, if silence has ever felt deliberate, standing still has ever felt like relief, then something in you has already aligned. And this is where the story ends, not because there is nothing left to say, but because saying more would be guidance. And guidance is no longer my role. The forest does not need me to speak for it. It already knows how to wait.